The tape wasn't in the system. It wasn't labeled, cataloged, or signed out. And the thing recorded on it only exists in the frames you're not supposed to see.
Welcome to Horror Audiobook.
This is not just a story about a missing person. It's about evidence that was never meant to be archived, and a recording that changes every time it's played. When a police intern finds an unlogged VHS labeled Tape 17, he assumes it's a clerical mistake, until he restores the corrupted footage and discovers something impossible. A figure that only appears between frames, moving closer every time the tape glitches. This audiobook is a descent into analog horror, buried files, and a truth that was never supposed to surface. And once you see it, it sees you back. Chapter 1. This tape was never supposed to exist. The basement of the Westbrook Police Department did not smell like justice. It smelled like damp cardboard, overheated wiring, and the slow rot of forgotten paper. Daniel Reyes noticed that on his first morning, how the air felt heavier the farther he descended the narrow concrete staircase. Each step down carried him deeper into the archive wing, where old cases were stacked in metal shelving units that stretched like corridors in a warehouse built for ghosts. The overhead lights buzzed faintly, not flickering, just buzzing, constant, mechanical, alive in their own tired way. He tightened his grip on the cardboard box tucked under his arm and repeated the phrase his supervisor had told him upstairs. If it's not logged, it's not real. It had been said as a joke. Mostly. Daniel had landed the internship through a professor who thought he needed practical experience. Criminal justice, chain of custody, archival procedure, real-world exposure. It all sounded respectable when printed on paper. But now, standing in the evidence basement alone, he felt something else creeping in. Exposure. The archive room stretched longer than he expected. Metal shelves groaned under the weight of decades. Labeled boxes, VHS tapes in plastic sleeves, evidence bags tagged with faded ink. Each item cataloged into the system, scanned, logged, and sealed in bureaucratic permanence. Order imposed on chaos. That was the point. Daniel set his box on a steel desk near the terminal computer. The monitor hummed to life, its beige casing older than he was. He typed in his intern credentials and opened the archive database. Today's assignment was simple: recatalog physical media from closed cases into digital records. Old VHS tapes primarily. Most were from the 90s, body cams before body cams, crime scene walkthroughs, recorded witness interviews. Dead formats holding dead stories. He moved down the first aisle, scanning labels. Case 94112, burglary. Case 95044, domestic disturbance. Case 97208, missing person. He paused at that one. Missing persons cases carried a different weight. No conclusion, no resolution, just absence. He pulled the box labeled 97208 from the shelf and carried it back to the desk. Dust lifted in a faint cloud, dancing in the fluorescent light. The case file inside read: Yelelisowen Mara. Age 26. Freelance videographer. Last seen August 17, 1997. Daniel flipped through the printed reports, witness statements, a grainy still image of a young woman with sharp cheekbones and curious eyes. She'd been documenting abandoned industrial sites for a local public access series. The last location listed, Blackridge Textile Plant. No body recovered. Official determination, accidental fall from unstable structure. Case status closed. Daniel frowned. Closed without a body. He scanned the first VHS tape inside the evidence box. Tape 12. Barcode present, logged. Tape 13. Logged. Tape 14. Logged. Tape 15. Logged. Tape 16. Logged. He entered each serial number into the database, verifying chain of custody. Everything matched. Then he reached for the back of the box, and his fingers touched something that did not belong. Another VHS tape. It wasn't placed neatly with the others. It was wedged behind them, almost hidden against the cardboard seam. Daniel pulled it out slowly. There was no barcode sticker, no evidence tag, no case number written on the spine, only a strip of masking tape across the front. In faded black marker, it read, 17. Just that. No initials, no date. He stared at it for a long moment. Then he turned to the computer. There was no tape 17 listed in the archive system. Tape 16 was the final logged media entry. Daniel checked again, scrolled, refreshed. Nothing. He felt a small, cold shift in his stomach. If it's not logged, it's not real. He repeated it softly this time. He lifted the tape closer to the desk lamp. The plastic casing was scratched, one corner slightly cracked. The spool inside looked worn, the ribbon tightly wound but uneven. Someone had handled it. Someone had meant to keep it. But no one had recorded it. Daniel leaned back in his chair. Clerical error, he told himself. It was the 90s. Paper records got lost, barcodes peeled off, things slipped through cracks. Still, he opened the physical case file again. Inside the media inventory sheet, a neat list. Tape 12, exterior walkthrough. Tape 13, interior first floor. Tape 14, upper levels. Tape 15, interview footage. Tape 16, final entry, site survey conclusion. Nothing beyond that. No crossed out entries, no correction fluid. It ended at 16. His eyes drifted back to the tape in his hand. 17. The number felt heavier than it should. The archive door creaked open behind him. Daniel nearly dropped it. "Easy," came a voice. He turned. A tall, stooped man stood in the doorway, wearing a windbreaker that looked older than the computer monitor. His hair was white and thinning, his face lined in permanent fatigue. Retired Detective Arthur Harlow. Daniel recognized him from the orientation tour. "Didn't mean to spook you," Harlow said. Daniel swallowed, "Just didn't hear you come in." Harlow stepped inside, glancing around the archive room with a familiarity that bordered on ownership. "Still smells the same," he muttered. Daniel hesitated, then held up the tape. "Detective Harlow, do you remember this case, Mara Ellison?" Harlow's gaze shifted to the box on the desk. Something in his expression tightened. "Yeah," he said quietly, "I remember." Daniel lifted the tape slightly. Was there ever a tape 17? The old detective didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked closer, eyes settling on the masking tape label. His jaw flexed. "Where'd you find that?" "Behind the others, in the evidence box." Harlow exhaled slowly through his nose. "That shouldn't be there." Daniel felt the words land heavier than he expected. "It's not in the system," Daniel said. "No barcode, no log entry." Harlow gave a faint, humorless smile. "Then it doesn't exist." "If it's not logged, it's not real," Daniel said automatically. Harlow's eyes flicked up to meet his. "Yeah," he replied, "that's what they tell interns." A silence stretched between them. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Daniel cleared his throat. "So, what is it?" Harlow's gaze lingered on the tape for a long moment. Then he said something Daniel would replay in his mind for weeks. "Some things," Harlow said carefully, "were easier when they stayed misplaced." Daniel's pulse ticked up. "Misplaced?" Harlow stepped back. "Finish your cataloging, kid, And if you're smart, he nodded toward the tape, you'll log it as damaged and move on. He turned toward the door. Daniel's voice followed him before he could stop it. "Detective, what's on it?" Harlow paused in the doorway but did not turn around. "Something that doesn't show up the first time you watch it." The door closed. The archive room felt smaller. Daniel stared at tape 17 in his hand. "Something that doesn't show up the first time." The phrase coiled in his thoughts. He looked at the old VHS player beneath the monitor. It hadn't been used in years, judging by the dust lining its edges. Slow buildup. Hint of danger. Minor relief. It was probably nothing. A duplicate. A damaged recording. Curiosity, he told himself, was part of the job. He slid the tape into the player. The machine accepted it with a mechanical click. The screen filled with static. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a distorted image flickered onto the monitor. Blackridge Textile Plant. Exterior. Evening light in 1997, captured in grainy analog haze. A woman's voice behind the camera. "Calm. Curious. Mara Ellison." Daniel leaned forward. The footage jittered slightly, tracking unstable. Just old tape degradation, he thought. Normal. The camera panned toward the dark entrance of the abandoned building. And just before the frame stabilized, for less than a fraction of a second, the image tore. A glitch. A thin, vertical distortion. Daniel blinked. He rewound 5 seconds. Played it again. The glitch happened in the exact same place. But this time, he was almost certain, there had been something inside it. A shape. Behind her. So fast it barely registered. Daniel's hand hovered over the rewind button. The fluorescent lights buzzed louder. Or maybe he was just noticing them now. He whispered the phrase again, softer this time. "If it's not logged, it's not real." He pressed rewind. The tape whirred backward. Outside the basement, the building was silent. And somewhere between frames, something moved. Chapter 2, the case they closed too quickly. The glitch could have been nothing. That was what Daniel told himself as he sat in the archive basement long after his shift technically ended. The screen had gone dark hours ago, yet the faint afterimage of static still clung to his vision whenever he blinked. It had only been a fraction of a second. A tear in the image. A distortion. And maybe, just maybe, a shape. But the mind had a way of filling gaps, especially when primed to expect something. If it's not logged, it's not real. The phrase no longer felt reassuring. Daniel powered the monitor back on. The VHS player hummed, warm now from use. Tape 17 remained inside it, waiting. He didn't press play. Not yet. Instead, he pulled Mara Ellison's case file closer and opened it again, determined to ground himself in facts. Paper didn't glitch. Ink didn't shift between frames. Mara Ellison, 26 years old, brown hair, hazel eyes, freelance videographer specializing in urban exploration long before the term had become trendy. There were photocopies of her business cards in the file, handwritten notes from interviewees, a copy of the last public access segment she'd produced, Forgotten Mills of Blackridge County. Daniel skimmed the witness statements. Statement 1, gas station clerk. She stopped in around dusk, bought batteries, said she'd be filming something big. She was excited. Statement 2, neighbor near Blackridge Textile Plant. Saw headlights around 9, thought it was kids trespassing. Statement 3, anonymous caller 2 days later. There was someone else out there that night. That last one had no follow-up. No transcript of a recorded call, No effort to identify the caller. Just a scribbled note in the margin. Unverified, likely prank. Daniel frowned. Closed cases had a rhythm, a procedural symmetry, evidence gathered, theories tested, conclusion reached. This file felt incomplete. He flipped to the incident summary. August 17, 1997. Mara entered Blackridge textile plant to document structural decay. Building condemned. Floor integrity compromised. Likely fell through upper-level walkway. Search conducted for 48 hours. No body recovered. Presumed fatal fall into inaccessible subbasement shaft. Case closed October 3, 1997. Daniel leaned back in his chair. No body recovered. That line repeated 3 times in the report, as if repetition made it stronger. Closed doesn't mean finished. The phrase formed quietly in his mind, uninvited. He looked at tape 16 on the desk beside the player. The final logged tape. The last official record. He ejected tape 17 and set it aside. Then he inserted tape 16. The screen crackled to life. Timecode appeared in the corner, 8/17/97, 21:42:16. Mara's voice filled the speakers. Light, amused, professional but informal. If anyone finds this tape after I've fallen through a hole or gotten tetanus, she laughed softly, please make sure my mom knows I died doing something cool. Daniel felt something twist in his chest. She sounded alive. The footage showed the interior of Blackridge textile plant. Rusted beams, torn insulation hanging like cobwebs, broken windows letting in thin slashes of moonlight. The air must have smelled like old oil and wet concrete. Mara moved carefully, narrating structural damage, zooming in on graffiti and collapsed stairwells. Nothing unusual. No distortion. No silhouettes. Normal analog grain. Daniel exhaled slowly. See? He let the footage play. The camera climbed a metal staircase, steps groaning under her weight. The flashlight beam jittered slightly as she ascended. I think this leads to the old weaving floor, she whispered. Her breath echoed faintly in the cavernous space. Daniel leaned closer. The camera reached the upper walkway, a narrow metal catwalk suspended above darkness. The beam of light swept outward. And then, the footage cut. Abruptly. Static. Timecode froze at 22:03:11. Daniel blinked. He rewound 10 seconds. Played it again. Same thing. The footage ended mid-pan. No stumble. No scream. No sound of falling metal. Just cut. As if someone had stopped recording deliberately. Daniel checked the tape length indicator. There were still 2 minutes of blank static after the cut. But no more footage. He ejected tape 16 slowly. That wasn't how accidental recordings ended. If she had fallen, the camera would have dropped. There would have been impact, sound, chaos. Instead, it stopped cleanly. He looked at tape 17, resting on the desk. Unlogged. Unacknowledged. Not real. Closed doesn't mean finished. Daniel inserted tape 17 again. The opening frames mirrored tape 16's ending location, same catwalk, same angle. But the timecode was gone. No date. No timestamp. Just distortion. Mara's breathing sounded different now. Less playful. Tighter. The flashlight beam shook slightly as she spoke. Okay, that wasn't there before. Daniel's skin prickled. The camera pointed down the length of the catwalk. In the distance, barely visible in analog haze. A dark vertical shape near the far railing. Too thin to be a person. Too tall to be debris. Daniel froze. The footage jittered. A glitch streaked across the screen. For a single frame, the shape was closer, then gone. Mara inhaled sharply. "Hello." Her voice echoed into the empty plant. No response. Daniel felt his heart rate rise. This was the part, he told himself. This was the moment she must have panicked, lost footing, fallen. But she didn't run. Instead, she took one cautious step forward. The beam of her flashlight trembled. The shape did not move. At least, not in continuous motion. The tape glitched again. A brief, violent distortion. When the image stabilized, the shape was halfway down the catwalk. No footsteps. No sound of metal shifting. Just distance erased. Daniel's mouth went dry. He hit pause. The image froze. Static hissed softly from the speakers. The shape remained in the center of the frame, blurry, elongated. He leaned closer. It looked almost stretched vertically, like a figure caught mid-transmission. The proportions were wrong. Arms too long. Head angled unnaturally to one side. He swallowed. "It moves in the gaps," he whispered before realizing he'd said it aloud. He didn't know why those words felt correct. He pressed play. Mara's breathing quickened. "I'm leaving," she said quietly. The camera swung toward the staircase behind her. And the glitch hit again. Harder this time. The screen tore vertically. Audio distorted into layered frequencies. For 3 frames, the shape stood directly behind her, close enough that its head nearly touched hers. Then, black. Complete silence. The tape ended. No static. No rewind. Just absence. Daniel sat motionless. The basement lights buzzed overhead, steady and indifferent. His pulse thudded in his ears. Close doesn't mean finished. He rewound the final 10 seconds. Played them again. This time he watched only the frames around the glitch. He counted them. 1, 2, 3. In the 3rd frame, something else flickered. Not just the figure. A reflection. In a broken window panel near the catwalk. For the briefest instant, he saw the silhouette and something else. A second distortion. Behind the first. Daniel's breath hitched. 2 shapes. Or layered frames bleeding together. He froze the image again. Zoomed in digitally. The analog grain resisted clarity, pixels dissolving into static. But the sense remained. The feeling that the footage was not simply recording events. It was compressing them. Stacking them. As if the horror didn't unfold in time. But between it. He leaned back slowly. His chair creaked. The archive room felt colder now. The file on the desk read. Case status closed. Daniel looked at the monitor. At the frozen image of the catwalk. At the faint outline where something impossible stood. Closed doesn't mean finished. And tape 17. Tape 17 should not exist. Somewhere above him, in the quiet police station offices, the world moved on normally. Phones rang. Printers hummed. People filed paperwork. But down here, in the basement, something from 1997 had just moved 3 frames closer. Daniel reached for the eject button. The VHS player refused. The tape remained inside. The machine made a low mechanical whine, like it was resisting him. And then, the screen flickered back on. Without him pressing play, static filled the monitor. And in the static, for less than a second, a vertical shape appeared. Not on the catwalk, not inside the plant, but centered in the frame, as if standing directly in front of the camera. as if testing the lens. Daniel's breath stopped. The screen snapped back to black. The VHS player clicked, ejecting tape 17 at last. The plastic cassette slid out slowly, quietly, waiting, and Daniel understood something with a certainty that made his hands tremble. The case hadn't been closed. It had been interrupted, and whatever Mara Ellison recorded was not done recording. Chapter 3: The Glitch That Shouldn't Repeat. The second time Daniel watched tape 17, he told himself he would do it properly. Not as a curious intern, not as a shaken witness, but as an archivist. If it wasn't logged, it wasn't real. And if it wasn't real, it could be measured. He brought in his own laptop the next morning, sleek, modern, quiet compared to the aging police terminal. Along with it came a USB capture device, cables, and a quiet determination that felt steadier than fear. Digitize it. Convert it. Break it into frames. Find the trick. The basement smelled sharper today, like dust disturbed after long rest. Daniel wondered if that was new or if he was simply more aware of everything now. He connected the VHS player to his captured device and pressed record on his software before pressing play on tape 17. The screen filled with Blackridge textile plant again. Catwalk. Metal beams. Mara's unsteady breathing. But through the digital feed, the flaws were amplified. Compression artifacts crawled across the screen. Horizontal tearing split the image into jittering bands. The audio hummed with phasing interference, two slightly misaligned channels creating a low, nauseating warble beneath her voice. Timecode flickered into existence for half a second, impossible numbers flashing. 22:03:11. 00:00:00. 99:99:99. Then gone. Daniel leaned forward, fingers poised over his keyboard. There, he whispered as the first heavy glitch tore through the footage. He marked the timestamp in his capture software. The distortion was violent, far more aggressive in digital form. A vertical seam split the image like a wound. For one frame, the silhouette appeared. He paused. Zoomed. Enhanced contrast. The frame resisted him. Pixels smeared when magnified, as though the image refused precision. Still, there it was. Behind Mara. Taller than her by nearly a head and a half. Limbs elongated. Head angled sharply to the left. He advanced one frame forward. Gone. Backward. Gone. Forward again. Gone. The silhouette existed in exactly one frame. No motion blur, no transitional overlap. It simply appeared. Then did not. Daniel felt the faint, creeping cold along his spine. He scrubbed backward further. Found the previous glitch. Paused again. There. Again. Single frame. Same shape. Same tilt of the head. But his breath caught. It wasn't in the same position. He toggled between the two frames. The earlier one, the silhouette stood near the far railing. The later one, it stood halfway down the catwalk. He checked the time difference between glitches. 5 seconds. The shape had moved several yards without any recorded motion. It moves in the gaps, Daniel murmured. He hated how natural the phrase felt. He scrubbed forward again. Waited for the next distortion. It came sharper this time, the audio distorting into layered echoes of Mara's breath. He paused on the glitch frame. The silhouette now stood only several feet behind her. Daniel's mouth went dry. That was impossible. He replayed the sequence from the beginning. Watched carefully. The silhouette never existed in continuous footage. Only in the tear. Only in the corruption. Only in the space between frames. It moves in the gaps. The room felt quieter. He became aware of the faint electrical hum of his laptop fan, the fluorescent lights overhead, the low static hiss from the VHS machine. He replayed the clip again. And this time, he noticed something new. The silhouette's arm. In the first glitch, its arms hung loosely at its sides. In the second, one arm was bent slightly. In the third, the arm was raised. Not fully, just a little, as if reaching. Daniel swallowed. He zoomed further. Adjusted brightness. The pixels dissolved into static, but the suggestion remained, an elongated limb extending toward Mara's shoulder. He sat back abruptly, knocking his knee against the desk. "Okay," he whispered to the empty room. "Okay, frame blending, compression artifact, double exposure." There were explanations. There had to be. Analog tape degraded. Magnetic interference caused ghosting images. Frame interlacing could produce phantom silhouettes. Except, those artifacts didn't move with intention. He played the entire clip from start to finish without pausing. Mara's voice trembled near the end. "Okay, I'm leaving." The glitch hit. 3 frames this time. He paused on each. Frame 1, silhouette inches behind her. Frame 2, closer still. Frame 3. It was almost touching her. Its head tilted differently now. Not to the left. To the right. As if studying her. Or the camera. Daniel felt sweat bead at the back of his neck. He glanced over his shoulder. The archive basement remained unchanged. Rows of metal shelves. Concrete walls. Closed door. No movement. He looked back at the screen. The silhouette remained frozen on the paused frame. Its face, if it could be called that, was featureless in grainy distortion. But the outline was clearer now. Long neck. Shoulders too narrow. Proportions wrong. As if something had attempted to approximate a human shape using incomplete data. He advanced 1 frame forward. Black. End of tape. Daniel stared at the blank screen. Silence filled the room. He rewound. Played the last 30 seconds again. This time he watched only Mara. Her posture. Her breathing. She never reacted to something directly behind her. She reacted to something ahead. Her flashlight beam pointed forward. Which meant, if the silhouette was behind her, she couldn't see it. The camera could. The lens could. The tape could. It moves in the gaps. Daniel's phone vibrated suddenly in his pocket. He jolted, heart slamming into his ribs. He fumbled it out. Just a text from his sister. "You alive down there in Cop Dungeon," face with tears of joy. He exhaled shakily. "Alive?" He typed back. "Yeah, just old tapes." He hesitated. Then added, "Weird ones." She responded almost immediately. "Aren't they all?" He allowed himself a faint, humorless smile. Minor relief. The world was still normal. Upstairs, sunlight filtered through office windows. People joked, coffee brewed. Down here, the footage waited. Daniel reopened the capture file and advanced frame by frame through the first glitch again. This time, he noticed something he had missed before. In the background, far behind the silhouette, there was darkness. Too dark. Not shadow. Absence. A vertical strip of black that did not align with the architecture of the plant. As if the space itself had torn open. He rewound again. Paused. Zoomed. The black strip seemed to pulse faintly between frames, not visible in adjacent footage, only in the glitch. He leaned closer, squinting. His own reflection faintly overlaid the monitor glass. And for half a heartbeat, he thought he saw something else in that reflection. Behind him. He whipped around. Nothing. Just shelves. Boxes. The closed archive door. His breathing quickened. He turned back to the monitor. The paused frame remained unchanged. Silhouette behind Mara. Arms slightly raised. Head tilted. Watching. Daniel's cursor hovered over the export button. He hesitated, then saved the digitized file to his laptop. The progress bar crawled across the screen. As it reached 100%, the laptop emitted a soft notification chime. And in that exact moment, the video preview window flickered. A new glitch. Not from the tape. From the file. Daniel stared. The paused frame shifted. The silhouette was no longer behind Mara. It was closer to the camera. Not by much, but closer. His throat tightened. He hadn't advanced the frame. He hadn't touched the keyboard. He slowly rewound the digital file. Scrolled back to the earlier glitch. Paused. The silhouette stood at the far railing again. He exhaled. Okay. File corruption. Playback error. He returned to the final glitch. Paused. The silhouette stood inches behind her. He stared carefully. Very carefully. It hadn't moved. Had it? He leaned closer. The outline seemed sharper now. Clearer. Or maybe his eyes were adjusting. He didn't know anymore. The fluorescent lights buzzed above. The basement air felt heavier. He whispered it again, softer this time. It moves in the gaps. And as if in answer, the laptop screen flickered once. Brief. Violent. And in that single flicker, for one frame, the silhouette did not stand behind Mara. It stood centered in the frame, closer to the lens than ever before, as if it had taken a step forward, as if it had noticed him noticing it. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. The frame vanished. The footage returned to normal. But his hands were shaking now, because glitches weren't supposed to change. Errors repeated exactly. That was how machines worked. Predictable. Precise. Except this one. This glitch. Shouldn't repeat. And yet every time he replayed it, it did. Closer. 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 Chapter 4. Freeze the frame. Watch it breathe. Daniel stopped trusting playback. Playback implied motion, flow, a beginning and an end. Tape 17 didn't behave that way. By the fourth viewing, he understood something fundamental. The horror wasn't in the footage itself. It was in the interruption. So he stopped watching it like a film. He began dissecting it like a body. Frame by frame. The archive basement felt smaller that evening. The air carried the metallic scent of overheated circuitry from the VHS deck, mingling with dust and the faint sourness of damp concrete. Daniel had turned off half the overhead lights without realizing it. The dimmer glow made the monitor feel brighter, isolated, surgical. The rest of the world narrowed to the screen. He loaded the digitized file. Disabled audio. Advanced one frame at a time. Click. Mara walking along the catwalk. Click. Flashlight beam trembling. Click. Metal railing. Click. First glitch approaching. His finger hovered over the arrow key. Click. The distortion split the image vertically. And there it was. The silhouette. He froze the frame, zoomed in further than before. This time he didn't rush. He studied it. The outline was clearer now, not sharper in resolution but more coherent. The shape no longer felt like random interference. It had proportion. Limbs too long for a human frame. Knees bending slightly backward. Head angled almost 90 degrees, chin nearly touching shoulder. No visible face. Just a smooth distortion where features should have been. He leaned closer, nose nearly brushing the monitor. "Okay," he murmured. "Okay, let's say your compression ghosting. Let's say your magnetic bleed-through." He advanced one frame forward. Gone. Backward. There again. Still. Unmoving. He switched the audio back on. Rewound 5 seconds before the glitch. Pressed play. Mara's breathing filled the speakers, the soft crunch of her shoes against debris, the distant hollow echo of a building long abandoned. Then, the glitch. Daniel paused immediately. And this time, the audio didn't stop. It stretched. A low, layered distortion spilled from the speakers, as if two recordings were playing slightly out of sync. He adjusted the volume higher. Under Mara's breath, there was something else. A whisper, too faint to isolate. He replayed it. Paused on the glitch frame again. The whisper layered beneath the static. Unintelligible. He leaned back slowly. The air felt cooler now. He scrubbed forward to the second glitch. Pause. The silhouette stood closer behind her. Head still tilted. Arms slightly raised. He zoomed again. And this time, the outline trembled. Not motion. Not blur. But a faint oscillation along its edges. As if it were vibrating between states. He stared at it, heart thudding quietly. "Freeze the frame," he whispered. He didn't know why he said it. But he obeyed himself. He left the frame paused. And watched. 10 seconds. 20. 30. The image should have remained perfectly static. Digital files didn't shift without input. But after nearly a full minute, he saw it. So subtle he nearly doubted it. The tilt of the head adjusted by a degree. The arm lifted slightly higher. Daniel's breath stopped. "No," he murmured. He hadn't touched the keyboard. The progress bar hadn't moved. The timestamp hadn't advanced. And yet, the silhouette's posture had changed. He scrubbed backward one frame. Then forward again. The head returned to its earlier angle. He waited. 30 seconds. The head tilted again. Not much, but enough. His pulse began pounding harder in his ears. "It moves in the gaps," he said softly. Except this time, there were no gaps. The frame was frozen. And it was still moving. He slammed the spacebar. The video resumed playback. The glitch vanished. Mara continued walking. The world felt briefly stable again. Minor relief. He exhaled shakily. Stress, he muttered, sleep deprivation. He hadn't slept well in 2 nights. That was all. He rewound again. This time to the final glitch, the one where the silhouette stood inches behind Mara. He paused on the clearest frame yet. The entity's outline was unmistakable now. Shoulders narrow. Torso elongated. Hands too long, fingers tapering to indistinct points. Its head tilted in the opposite direction from before. As if mirroring him. Daniel felt a chill creep along his scalp. He raised his own hand unconsciously. The silhouette's arm in the frozen frame remained extended. He swallowed. "Okay," he whispered, "let's test something." He muted the video, left it paused, and stared. 1 minute passed. Nothing moved. He almost laughed from relief. Then, the audio activated on its own. A low hiss filled the room. He hadn't touched the volume. The speakers crackled, and beneath the static, layered voices. Not Mara's, not environmental noise. Multiple tones overlapping. He leaned closer. The whispers were too faint to parse. He increased the volume slowly. The hiss grew louder. The layered voices sharpened. They weren't random. They were synchronized, repeating something. Daniel's name. Daniel. Soft. Breathy. Overlapping. Daniel, Daniel, Daniel. His blood turned cold. He looked at the keyboard. The mute icon still displayed. The file still paused. The progress bar unmoving. The silhouette on screen tilted its head further. The whispers continued. Daniel. His throat tightened. He whispered back without meaning to. Stop. The audio cut abruptly. Silence slammed into the room. The monitor flickered once. The silhouette remained frozen. Head tilted. Arm extended. Watching. Daniel's reflection hovered faintly in the dark portions of the screen. And in that reflection, for half a heartbeat, he saw the silhouette not behind Mara, but behind him. He spun in his chair. The archive room remained unchanged. Rows of boxes. Closed door. Buzzing lights. No movement. He turned back slowly. The paused frame still showed Mara. Still showed the silhouette inches behind her. Except, the arm was no longer reaching toward her. It was angled forward. Toward the camera. Toward him. Daniel's hands trembled. He hadn't advanced the frame. He hadn't touched the controls. He leaned in slowly. The entity's outline was clearer than ever before. And this time, within the distortion of its face, two faint darker hollows formed. Not eyes, but impressions. Places where eyes should be. He stared into them. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The basement air felt thin. He whispered it again, barely audible. It moves in the gaps. The silhouette's head straightened. Just slightly. No longer tilted. Aligned. Facing forward. Facing him. Daniel's chest tightened. The screen flickered violently. The image tore horizontally this time. And for a single frame, the silhouette was no longer in the plant. It stood against a different background. Concrete. Metal shelving. Archive boxes. Daniel's archive basement. The glitch vanished. The plant returned. The silhouette back behind Mara. Frozen. Unmoving. The audio hissed faintly once more. Then silence. Daniel slowly reached forward. His finger hovered over the power button on the VHS player. He pressed it. The machine shut down. The monitor went black. The room plunged into dim fluorescent half-light. He sat there for a long moment. Breathing. Listening. The whispers did not return. The shelves did not shift. The door did not open. Minor relief. Just a malfunctioning tape. Just stress. Just imagination. He stood up slowly. The chair wheels squeaked against concrete. As he turned toward the staircase, the powered-off monitor crackled faintly. A single pixel of white light appeared at its center. Daniel froze. The pixel stretched vertically. A thin line. like a tear, and from within that tear, for less than a second, an elongated silhouette stood, centered, perfectly still. Then the screen went completely dark. No glow, no static, nothing. Daniel did not move for several seconds. The air in the basement felt heavier than before, thicker, as if something unseen had taken up space. He whispered one last time, voice barely audible in the silence. Freeze the frame. Because he understood something now. The entity did not need motion. It did not need playback. It did not need glitches. It only needed attention. And he had just given it more than enough. Chapter 5. The camera saw more than she did. Daniel did not turn the monitor back on that night. He left the basement with the lights buzzing behind him, the shelves standing like silent jurors, and tape 17 locked inside a drawer that suddenly felt insufficient. The thin metal of the cabinet seemed like an insult, like trying to contain smoke in a paper bag. Upstairs, the police station smelled of burnt coffee and printer toner. Officers laughed near the front desk. A radio squawked about traffic incidents and routine disputes. The world, as always, continued. For a few hours, Daniel convinced himself that the basement had been a closed system, that whatever happened down there remained confined to wires and magnetic tape. He was wrong. Hours passed, though outside, the night stayed the same. Daniel sat at his apartment desk long after midnight, the digitized copy of tape 17 open on his laptop screen. He told himself it was safer this way. No VHS player, no analog interference. Just data, just code. Data behaved. Data obeyed logic. He replayed the footage from the beginning, this time with headphones on. The city outside his apartment window hummed faintly, distant sirens, passing cars, a world grounded in physical space. The catwalk returned. Mara's voice trembled slightly more than he remembered. "Okay, I heard that." Daniel paused. He hadn't noticed that line before. He rewound 5 seconds. Played it again. "There it is," she whispered into the darkness of the plant. "Okay, I heard that." The flashlight beam jittered. But the camera did not turn toward the source of the sound. She scanned left, then right, then forward again. She never looked behind her. Daniel scrubbed frame by frame. The silhouette did not appear during this moment. Only normal analog grain. Only rusted beams and shadow. But her breathing had changed. Faster, shallower, as if she sensed proximity. The camera saw more than she did. That thought crept in slowly. Daniel replayed the section again. And this time, he listened only to the audio. Underneath the low hum of wind moving through broken windows, there was something else. A faint scraping sound. Metal against metal. But it didn't echo naturally. It layered, as if the sound source existed in multiple positions at once. Mara turned slightly toward the noise. The flashlight beam caught a wall of shattered glass panels along the plant's far side. Daniel leaned closer. He slowed the playback to half speed. The beam of light slid across the fractured panes. Each shard caught and distorted her reflection. And in one of those fragments, there it was, a vertical smudge. Not in the center of the frame, not behind her body, but in the reflection. Tall, too thin, standing directly behind her. He paused, zoomed into the broken glass section. The reflection was warped, stretched across uneven surfaces. But the silhouette was unmistakable. Present in the glass, absent from the main frame. Daniel's pulse began to rise. He toggled between frames. In the reflection, the silhouette moved slightly closer. In the main image, nothing. Empty catwalk. Mara stepped forward cautiously, her voice barely above a whisper. Okay, that's not funny. Daniel swallowed. She wasn't reacting to the reflection. She couldn't see it. The angle of her body never shifted. She was listening for something ahead. The camera saw more than she did. The reflection proved it. He advanced another frame. The silhouette in the glass tilted its head sharply. The angle mirrored the tilt he had seen in the glitches. He zoomed further. Pixels blurred, but the posture remained clear. He felt an unsettling realization form. The entity was not confined to glitches. It was present continuously, but only visible in distortions. Reflections. Compression tears. Between frames. It moves in the gaps, he whispered. Mara suddenly gasped in the footage. The camera jerked upward. The flashlight beam cut through darkness. Daniel's heart slammed in his chest. He rewound. Watched carefully. There, just before she gasped. Another reflection. A larger glass pane near the ceiling. In its warped surface, the silhouette stood directly behind her, close enough to touch. Yet in the primary frame, the space remained empty. Daniel felt cold sweat gather along his back. The camera saw more than she did, and perhaps more than it was meant to. He let the footage play forward without pausing. The glitches began appearing more frequently now. Not just the violent vertical tears, but subtle jitter, horizontal distortions, color shifts. The audio phasing deepened. Mara's breathing overlapped itself, as if recorded twice. She turned slightly toward the staircase. I don't like this, she muttered. The screen flickered. The silhouette appeared in a single frame again, closer than before. Daniel barely flinched this time. He expected it. Psychological loop. Anticipation. The fear was no longer the surprise of seeing it. The fear was watching it approach. The next glitch came harder. The image tore diagonally. The audio distorted into layered frequencies. Daniel paused. The silhouette's arm was extended fully now. Fingers elongated, indistinct, almost brushing her shoulder. And this time, the footage did something new. The image trembled violently for several frames. The tape seemed to resist playback. Digital artifacts crawled across the screen. The progress bar stuttered. Daniel glanced at his laptop. CPU usage spiked. The file size indicator flickered, as if the video were attempting to rewrite itself. He swallowed. The closer the figure appeared, the more unstable the footage became. As if the tape itself resisted playback. As if revealing the entity placed strain on the medium. He rewound again. The software froze for 2 seconds. Then resumed. He played the final 30 seconds. Mara turned sharply toward a sound ahead. Her flashlight beam flicked toward a collapsed beam structure. Nothing there. She whispered, barely audible, "You're not funny." Another glitch. Pause. The silhouette stood directly behind her, closer than ever. And for the first time, in the reflection of her camera lens itself, Daniel saw something else. The lens glass curved slightly. In its faint convex reflection, the silhouette appeared not behind her, but in front of the lens, between her and the camera. He felt his breath leave him in a slow, shallow exhale. That was impossible. The entity could not occupy 2 spatial positions at once. Unless it wasn't bound by spatial continuity. Unless it existed only in distortions of perception. The camera saw more than she did. and perhaps more than it should. Daniel leaned back in his chair. The room around him felt subtly misaligned. His apartment desk lamp cast a steady glow. But for a fleeting second, he thought he saw it flicker. He glanced at the darkened window beside his desk. His reflection stared back at him. Alone. He looked back at the laptop screen. The paused frame trembled faintly. He hadn't touched anything. The silhouette's outline sharpened. And then, the video glitched without input. A new frame inserted itself. For less than half a second, the catwalk vanished, replaced by a dimly lit room. Metal shelves, archive boxes, concrete walls. Daniel's breath caught. The basement. The frame snapped back to Mara. The glitch ended. He stared at the screen. The tape was no longer simply replaying the past. It was integrating the present. The closer the entity appeared, the more unstable the footage became. And the more unstable the footage became, the thinner the barrier felt. Daniel slowly closed the laptop lid. The room fell into darkness except for the desk lamp. His heartbeat echoed in his ears. Minor relief washed over him. The screen was off. The footage contained just data, just files. He stood up and walked toward the kitchen for water. The hallway of his apartment felt longer than usual. The air cooler. He filled a glass at the sink, hands trembling slightly. And as he turned back toward his desk, he noticed something that made his stomach drop. His laptop lid was open again. The screen illuminated. Playing. He had not touched it. On the screen, the catwalk footage played in real time. No controls visible. No cursor. Just playback. Mara's breathing. The flashlight beam trembling. And in the reflection of broken glass, the silhouette turned. Not toward her. Toward the camera. Toward him. Daniel's hand tightened around the glass. Water sloshed onto the floor unnoticed. The footage glitched violently. The silhouette filled the entire frame for one distorted second. Then, black. The laptop screen went dark. Complete silence. Daniel stood frozen in the center of his apartment. Heart racing. The quiet hum of the refrigerator the only sound. He whispered into the stillness, voice barely audible. It moves in the gaps. And for the first time, he understood something that chilled him more than the glitches ever had. The tape was not degrading. It was adapting. And the camera had always been looking both ways. Chapter 6. Someone tried to erase this. Daniel did not sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling while the city outside moved in slow, indifferent cycles. Headlights slid across his bedroom wall like pale search beams. Pipes ticked inside the walls. Somewhere in the building, a neighbor coughed. Every small sound felt layered. Every silence felt deliberate. By morning, exhaustion wrapped around him like damp fabric, but beneath it, something sharper had taken root. Curiosity. Because if the footage was changing, if the glitches were adapting, then someone had known, and someone had tried to stop it. The archive basement greeted him with its familiar hum, fluorescent lights, dust motes floating in artificial daylight, metal shelves standing in quiet formation. Tape 17 sat where he had locked it. He stared at the drawer for a long moment before opening it. The cassette looked ordinary again. Plastic casing scratched at the corners, masking tape label reading simply 17. No movement. No distortion. Just a relic. He removed it carefully and set it on the steel desk beneath the brighter task lamp. If someone had tried to erase it, There would be evidence. He retrieved a small precision screwdriver from his bag. He wasn't technically authorized to open evidence, but tape 17 wasn't logged. If it's not logged, it's not real. The phrase had become bitter now. He turned the cassette over and removed the 5 small screws along its back. The plastic halves separated with a faint snap. Inside, the magnetic ribbon was tightly wound around 2 spools. At first glance, nothing seemed unusual. Then he noticed it. Near the outer edge of the tape reel, about 20 seconds from the end, there was a section where the ribbon appeared slightly duller. Scuffed, as if something abrasive had dragged across it. He leaned closer. The magnetic coating had been partially scraped away in a thin, uneven band. Not enough to fully destroy the tape. Just enough to damage a segment. Deliberately. Daniel's pulse quickened. Someone had opened this before. Someone had tried to erase something specific. He gently rotated the spool with his finger. The scraped section aligned roughly with the final glitch sequence, the one where the silhouette nearly filled the frame. He felt a cold understanding settle in. They hadn't tried to destroy the entire tape. Only the end. Only the part where it came closest. His gaze drifted to the shelves lining the archive. How many hands had held this? How many eyes had seen what he was seeing now? He reassembled the cassette carefully, tightening the screws until the casing sealed again. Then he turned to the terminal computer. If someone tried to erase it physically, there might be a record digitally. He logged into the archive database and navigated to the case file for Mara Ellison. Case 97208. Media Inventory. Tape 12. Tape 13. Tape 14. Tape 15. Tape 16. No tape 17. He switched to audit history, a feature interns rarely needed. The log populated slowly, lines of text scrolling down the aging monitor. Entry created, 1997-08-19. Media inventory updated, 1997-08-22. Case closed, 1997-10-03. Then, a single anomaly, 2004-06-14, media entry modified. Daniel leaned closer. Modified by A. Harlow. His stomach tightened. He clicked into the modification details. The system hesitated, then displayed. Entry deleted, media 17. Daniel stared at the screen. There it was. Proof. Tape 17 had once been logged, and then removed. He checked the timestamp again. 2004. 7 years after the case was closed. Why revisit it? Why delete it then? His hands felt colder on the keyboard. He printed the audit log quietly and folded the paper into his pocket. The archive room felt different now. Not just a basement of forgotten evidence, but a place of edited history. Someone had tried to erase this, and they had nearly succeeded. Daniel found Detective Arthur Harlow in a diner 3 blocks from the station. The kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that tasted perpetually burned. The air smelled of grease and old conversations. Harlow sat alone near the window, stirring his coffee without drinking it. He looked up as Daniel approached. "You shouldn't be here," Harlow said before Daniel spoke. Daniel slid into the booth opposite him. "You deleted it," he said quietly. Harlow's stirring stopped. "Deleted what?" Media entry 17, in 2004. The detective's eyes flickered, not surprise but recognition. "You went digging." "It was already dug," Daniel replied. "You just covered it back up." Silence settled between them, thick as syrup. The diner radio murmured softly overhead. Harlow finally leaned back in his seat. "You watched it," he said. Daniel hesitated. "Yes." Harlow studied him carefully. "Did it move?" The question landed like a stone. Daniel didn't answer immediately. Harlow nodded slowly. "That's what I thought." Daniel's pulse quickened. "Why delete it?" Harlow exhaled slowly. "Because it didn't obey physics." The words felt rehearsed. "Resigned." Daniel leaned forward. "What does that mean?" Harlow stared into his coffee. "When we first logged the tape, it was normal, just grainy footage. No silhouette, no distortion beyond analog junk." Daniel's breath caught. "It changed." Harlow nodded faintly. "We reviewed it weeks later. Something was there that hadn't been there before." Daniel felt the air thin around him. "You're saying the tape updated?" "I'm saying," Harlow replied, voice low, "that the more we watched it, the clearer it became." Daniel swallowed. "It moves in the gaps." Harlow's eyes snapped up. "Don't say that." The tension in his voice made Daniel's chest tighten. Harlow leaned closer across the table. "Listen carefully. We tried to erase it physically, scraped the tape, re-recorded over it." Daniel's hands clenched under the table. "And it came back." A faint tremor edged Harlow's voice now. "Not immediately, but when we reviewed it again, it was there, closer." Daniel's pulse pounded in his ears. "We buried it because it didn't obey physics," Harlow repeated. "Buried it." "Deleted the log, removed it from active inventory, locked it away. No official record means no review. No review means no reinforcement." Daniel's throat felt dry. "Reinforcement." Harlow met his eyes. "It needs observation." The diner's ambient noise faded into distant hum. "The more it's watched," Harlow continued, "the more defined it becomes." Daniel's thoughts raced. "That's impossible." "Yeah," Harlow said quietly, "that's what we said too." Silence stretched between them. Outside the diner window, traffic moved steadily past. "Normal. Predictable. Safe." Daniel broke the silence. "What happened to the officers who reviewed it?" Harlow's jaw tightened. "One transferred out of state within a month, said he couldn't sleep, claimed he saw stuttering movement in reflections." Daniel's heart skipped. "The other?" Harlow looked down. "Quit." "Why?" Harlow's voice lowered further. "He said the tape wasn't showing the plan anymore." Daniel's breath caught. "What was it showing?" Harlow hesitated. "His living room." A chill crawled along Daniel's spine. The diner felt smaller now. The windows too thin. Harlow leaned back. "You should stop." Daniel didn't respond. Because he already knew he wouldn't. Curiosity had eclipsed fear. "Closed doesn't mean finished," Daniel murmured. Harlow's expression hardened. "You think you're investigating a cold case," he said. "You're feeding something." The words hung between them. Feeding something. Daniel stood slowly from the booth. He left cash on the table for his coffee he hadn't touched. As he stepped outside, the afternoon light felt too bright. Too exposed. The city noises too sharp. He reached into his pocket and unfolded the printed audit log. Media entry 17, deleted. Someone tried to erase this. They scraped it. They buried it. They deleted it. And it came back. Daniel glanced at the dark reflection in a storefront window beside him. For a fleeting second, the reflection seemed delayed, a half-beat behind his movement. He blinked. It aligned again. Normal. Just stress. He turned toward the police station, toward the basement, toward tape 17. because now he understood something deeper. This wasn't about a missing person. It wasn't about a corrupted file. It was about something that resisted deletion, something that adapted. And if erasing it didn't work, then someone would have to understand it. As Daniel descended the basement staircase once more, the fluorescent lights buzzed louder than before. The air felt heavier. The drawer containing tape 17 waited at the end of the room, unopened, unwatched. For now, he whispered softly to himself as he reached for it. If it's not logged. But this time, he didn't finish the sentence, because some things didn't need to be real to exist. And some things only grew stronger when you tried to erase them. Chapter 7. It doesn't exist between seconds. The basement clock ticked in precise, obedient seconds. Each click clean, each interval measurable. Time down here behaved. That was the illusion. Daniel sat before the monitor with a notebook open beside him, pages filled with diagrams of frame structures and scribbled phrases that no longer sounded like metaphors. Interlacing, refresh cycles, frame blending. Between seconds. He hadn't gone home. Hours had passed, though outside, the night stayed the same. He had brought in better software, professional-grade editing tools capable of isolating individual fields within interlaced footage. Old VHS recordings didn't capture whole frames in one instant. They captured alternating lines, odd and even, refreshing at slightly different intervals. Two halves forming a whole. Two images stitched together fast enough that the human eye believed it continuous. If something existed between those refresh cycles, it would never fully appear in a complete frame. Only in the seams. Daniel loaded the digitized file of tape 17 again. The catwalk filled the screen. Mara's breathing echoed softly. He toggled into field separation mode. The image split subtly. Odd lines isolated. Even lines isolated. He advanced one field at a time. Click. Odd field, Mara mid-step. Click. Even field, nearly identical. Click. Odd field, glitch approaching. Click. Even field. The silhouette appeared. Only in the even field. Not in the odd. Daniel's pulse quickened. He rewound. Advanced slowly again. Odd field, empty catwalk. Even field, silhouette. Odd field, empty. Even field, silhouette slightly closer. His throat tightened. It wasn't just between frames. It was between refresh cycles. It existed in the half-image. The incomplete one. The part the brain stitched over. It doesn't exist between seconds, he whispered. Because seconds were illusions. Time on tape was not continuous, it was constructed. And something was living inside the construction. He leaned closer, isolating the even field fully. Now the screen showed only half-resolution imagery, horizontal lines faintly visible across Mara's body. And there, the silhouette stood clear, more stable than ever before. Less distortion, more definition. Its limbs elongated beyond the constraints of the frame. Head tilted, but less sharply now. More aligned. Studying. Daniel's heartbeat thudded heavily in his chest. He switched back to full-frame view. The silhouette vanished. Back to field isolation. It returned. He swallowed hard. It moves in the gaps. He advanced through the next glitch. Odd field, empty. Even field, silhouette closer. Odd, empty. Even closer still. The progression was undeniable. He rewound to the beginning of the tape. Checked the first appearance. Even field only. Single refresh cycle. One isolated half image. He skipped ahead to the midpoint. Even field. 2 consecutive refresh cycles. The silhouette persisted longer now. 3 half images instead of 1. Daniel felt his breath shorten. He jumped to the final glitch. Isolated the even field. And froze. The silhouette's face was visible. Not detailed, but shaped. 2 deeper voids where eyes should be. A slight indentation suggesting a mouth. And this time, it appeared in 3 consecutive refresh cycles. Not just 1. 3. The gaps were widening. It moves in the gaps, and the gaps are getting wider. The words felt heavier now. Less observation. More warning. He switched rapidly between odd and even fields. Odd Mara alone. Even, the entity inches behind her. Odd empty. Even, its arm raised. Odd nothing. Even, its face fully forward. Daniel's fingers trembled on the keyboard. He maximized the even field image and adjusted contrast. The silhouette sharpened unnaturally, as if it preferred being isolated, as if it required incompleteness. The more incomplete the frame, the more complete it became. The room around Daniel seemed quieter. Or perhaps he was just listening harder. He leaned back slowly in his chair, eyes never leaving the screen. What happened if he removed the odd fields entirely? He rendered a temporary version, using only the even refresh cycles. The playback stuttered, half the temporal information gone. The image flickered rapidly. Mara's movements jerky, unnatural, and within that stutter, the silhouette no longer flickered. It walked, not smoothly, but progressively, each refresh cycle a step forward, each half-image advancing it closer to the lens. Daniel's pulse pounded violently now. He watched the entity traverse the catwalk in segmented bursts. 1 refresh cycle. It stood near the railing. Next, midway. Next, behind her. Next, beside her. The footage should have ended there. But it didn't. In this isolated field rendering, it stepped past her, toward the camera, toward him. Daniel slammed the spacebar. Playback stopped. Silence filled the basement. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. He stared at the paused image. The silhouette stood almost flush against the lens, its face occupying nearly half the frame. Those void-like impressions where eyes should be. Focused forward. Focused on him. He whispered hoarsely. It doesn't exist between seconds, because seconds implied continuity. But this thing thrived in discontinuity. He rewound again. Rendered another isolated field segment. This time starting earlier. The entity appeared sooner than before. 3 refresh cycles instead of 1. He hadn't watched the beginning in detail since earlier that night. Had it changed? He compared the original digitized backup file stored externally. Loaded it. Scrubbed to the first glitch. Even field. The silhouette appeared for 1 cycle. He loaded the working copy. Even field. 3 cycles. Daniel's mouth went dry. It was expanding. Not just approaching, but persisting. The gaps were getting wider. His breathing quickened. He became aware of something else. The basement monitor refresh rate. The faint hum of electrical cycling. He glanced at the digital clock in the corner of the screen. 03:17 a.m. The same time stamped in the audit log when tape 17 had last been modified. His spine stiffened. He returned to the paused frame of the silhouette's face. The voids where eyes should be seemed darker now, more focused. He leaned closer, and the monitor flickered. Just once, the image distorted vertically, a tear across the center of the screen. For a single refresh cycle, the background behind the silhouette was not the textile plant. It was the archive basement. Metal shelves, concrete walls, and Daniel, reflected faintly in the glass of the monitor. The tear vanished. The catwalk returned, but the silhouette remained centered. Too close. Daniel's heart hammered. He shut off field isolation, returned to full-frame playback. The silhouette resumed its intermittent glitching. Contained, fragmented, but now he knew. It wasn't bound by frames. It was bound by observation. The more incomplete the image, the more space it had. And every replay, every analysis, every enhancement widened the gap. He pushed his chair back slowly. The legs scraped loudly against the concrete floor. The sound echoed too sharply. He stood. The room felt subtly misaligned again, as if depth perception had shifted. He looked toward the far end of the archive, between two metal shelves. For the briefest fraction of a second, he thought he saw a vertical distortion, like a heat shimmer, gone immediately. His breath caught. He whispered the phrase again, voice barely audible. It moves in the gaps, and the gaps are getting wider. Because it wasn't just the tape anymore. It wasn't just the interlaced frames. It was every constructed image, every artificial refresh, every moment stitched together by perception. And perception was fragile. The basement clock ticked again. Clean, precise. But Daniel no longer trusted it. Because somewhere, between 1 second and the next, something was learning how to stay. Chapter 8. The footage starts recording him. Daniel stopped counting the hours. The basement clock still ticked with obedient precision, but the rhythm no longer comforted him. Seconds felt stitched together, thin seams holding something back. Or holding something in. He had told himself he would stop isolating the fields. Stop enhancing the gaps. Stop feeding it. But curiosity is a slow addiction. It doesn't spike like fear. It settles, it whispers. Just one more test. Just one more comparison. By the time morning light filtered faintly through the narrow basement windows, Daniel's laptop had rendered 6 different versions of tape 17. Odd fields only, even fields only, alternating frame composites, slowed playback, enhanced contrast. He hadn't noticed when the fan began running harder. He hadn't noticed when the external hard drive light started blinking continuously. He only noticed when a notification sound chimed softly. A file had been created. Daniel frowned. He hadn't exported anything. He moved the cursor slowly across the screen. In the project directory, beneath the Tape 17 folder, was a new file. Capture 0317 Auto, MP4. Timestamp 03:17 a.m. His stomach tightened. He checked the clock in the corner of his screen. 03:21 a.m. He hadn't initiated any screen capture. He hadn't enabled auto-record. Slowly, carefully, he double-clicked the file. The video opened. Static. For 2 seconds. Then, an image. Not the textile plant. Not Mara. The archive basement. Daniel's breath left him in a thin, trembling exhale. The camera angle was wrong. It wasn't from the security camera mounted in the corner. He knew that view. It wasn't from his laptop webcam. he recognized its low resolution. This angle was elevated. Behind him, slightly to the right, he watched himself sitting at the desk, hunched over the keyboard. The glow of the monitor illuminated his face. The file was 20 seconds long. He scrubbed forward. On screen, he leaned closer to his monitor, just as he had minutes earlier. The timestamp embedded in the lower corner read 03:17:04. He scrubbed further. At 03:17:12, the image glitched. For a single frame, a tall, elongated silhouette stood behind his chair. Daniel's breath caught violently in his throat. He spun around in the real basement. Empty. Shelves. Concrete. The closed archive door. He turned back to the laptop. The frame was gone. Playback continued normally. Just him. Alone. He rewound to 03:17:12. Paused. Advanced frame by frame. There. One frame. The silhouette. Closer than ever before. Not grainy like the tape. Clearer. Less distortion. Standing inches behind him. Head tilted. He swallowed hard. It moves in the gaps, he whispered. And now, the gaps were here. He shut the file. Closed the folder. His hands were trembling. He checked his screen recording settings. Disabled. Checked webcam software. Inactive. He slowly opened the system log. The file creation entry read: Source unknown device. Device ID NA. Daniel's pulse pounded so loudly it felt audible in the room. He lifted his gaze to the top of his laptop screen. The tiny webcam lens stared back at him. Dark. Inactive. He raised his hand slowly. Waved it in front of the lens. Nothing. The green indicator light did not turn on. He leaned back in his chair, forcing himself to breathe slowly. Minor relief. Maybe malware. Maybe remote access. He unplugged the laptop from the network cable. Disabled Wi-Fi. Disconnected everything except power. The basement felt unnaturally quiet. He hesitated, then reopened the new file. This time he watched without pausing. He watched his own image lean forward, watched the glitch occur, and watched the silhouette appear. But this time, at 03:17:13, the silhouette did not vanish immediately. It remained for 3 consecutive frames, standing directly behind him. Head no longer tilted. Aligned. Facing forward. Facing the camera. Daniel's hands began to shake uncontrollably. He reached forward and shut the laptop lid abruptly. The screen went black. Silence. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly. The basement air felt thicker. He sat motionless for nearly a minute. Just breathing. Listening. Nothing moved. Nothing flickered. He exhaled slowly. Then, a soft click. The laptop lid lifted slightly, just enough for light to leak from the hinge. Daniel froze. The lid continued rising. Slowly, as if guided by unseen fingers. The screen illuminated, playing automatically. Not the archive footage. Not the screen capture. But tape 17. The catwalk. Mara's breathing. Daniel's own breath became shallow. The footage glitched violently. The silhouette appeared behind Mara. Then, another glitch. The scene shifted. The catwalk dissolved, replaced by the archive basement. From the same impossible elevated angle. Daniel's chair centered in frame. But the chair was empty. Daniel stared at the screen. His stomach dropped. He looked down. He was sitting in the chair. He looked back at the screen. The chair remained empty. The footage timestamp read 03/17/17. The glitch intensified. The silhouette stepped into frame. Behind the empty chair. Its limbs elongated. Head slowly tilting toward the lens. Daniel's heartbeat thundered in his ears. "It doesn't exist between seconds," he whispered. The screen flickered. The image updated. Now the chair in the footage was not empty. Now Daniel sat in it. But he wasn't moving. He was perfectly still. Eyes fixed forward. Unblinking. He watched himself watching. A layered image. Reality and recording overlapping imperfectly. The footage stuttered. For one refresh cycle. The silhouette leaned down. Its face inches from his recorded ear. The audio hissed. Layered whispers bleeding through the speakers. "Daniel." His name repeated in overlapping tones. He clamped his hands over his ears. The whispers did not stop. They felt internal, resonating inside his skull. The screen glitched violently. Horizontal tearing. Vertical distortion. The image scrambled. Then stabilized. Back to the catwalk. Myra's final moment. The silhouette inches from her. Then, the image shifted again. The catwalk warped. Merged with metal shelving. Concrete walls. Archive boxes. The plant and the basement occupying the same spatial plane. Daniel's reflection faintly visible on the screen glass. And behind his reflection, something moved. Not in the footage. In the glass. He turned slowly. The basement remained still. But his peripheral vision flickered. A stutter in motion near the far shelves. Gone instantly. He turned back to the laptop. The playback stopped abruptly. The screen went black. A new file name appeared in the directory. Capture 0318 Auto, MP4. Timestamp 03:18 a.m. Daniel's breath came in shallow bursts now. He did not open it. He didn't need to. He understood the pattern. The footage was no longer documenting the past. It was documenting him. Recording him between seconds. He whispered, voice trembling. "It moves in the gaps, and the gaps are getting wider." The fluorescent lights overhead flickered once. A faint vertical distortion shimmered along the edge of the far shelf. Just a ripple. Like heat over asphalt. Daniel stared at it. His heart pounded violently. The shimmer lingered half a second longer than before. Then disappeared. Silence reclaimed the room. The basement clock ticked. Clean. Measured. But Daniel no longer trusted it. Because somewhere, between one refresh cycle and the next, the footage was still running. And it was no longer content with the catwalk. It had found a new subject. Him. Chapter 9, You Can't Unsee a Frame. Daniel stopped trusting continuity. It began subtly. A coworker upstairs laughing, and for half a second the sound didn't match the movement of his mouth. A door closing in 2 stages, as if the world had buffered before completing the action. His own reflection in a restroom mirror blinking a fraction of a beat too late. Sleep deprivation, he told himself. 3 days of fractured rest, coffee replacing blood. But deep down he knew the truth. Once you isolate the seams, you can't go back to believing in smoothness. You can't unsee a frame. By the time the sun rose again, Daniel's eyes burned constantly. The basement felt colder than usual, the air heavy and metallic. He hadn't opened the auto-generated file from 0318. He didn't need to. He understood the escalation. Still, there was one thing left to confirm. One final comparison. He needed to know whether tape 17 had changed again. Because if it had, then the pattern was accelerating. He inserted the physical VHS into the player once more. The machine whirred to life reluctantly. The screen filled with static. Then, the catwalk. Mara's breathing. Her whisper. I heard that. Daniel felt a flicker of something almost tender. She didn't know. She never knew. The camera saw more than she did. And now, he did too. He scrubbed forward carefully, avoiding field isolation for now. He wanted full-frame playback. He wanted to see it as a whole. The first glitch appeared. He did not pause. The silhouette flickered into existence for a single frame. He kept playing. The second glitch. 2 frames now. The silhouette closer. Arms slightly raised. Daniel's chest tightened. He advanced to the final sequence. The air in the basement felt thick and unmoving. The fluorescent lights hummed louder in his awareness. Mara's breathing quickened in the footage. I'm leaving, she whispered. The glitch hit. Daniel paused. The silhouette stood directly behind her. No longer distorted beyond recognition. Its limbs were defined now. Elongated but symmetrical. Head no longer sharply tilted. Aligned. Balanced. Watching. He swallowed. He advanced 1 frame forward. The arm extended fully. Fingers inches from her shoulder. He advanced again. The hand passed through her. No resistance. No interaction. Like she existed in a separate layer. The entity wasn't reaching for her. It was reaching past her. Daniel's pulse pounded violently. He zoomed in. The silhouette's face filled the upper half of the frame. 2 hollow impressions where eyes should be. And this time, there was detail. Not clarity, but suggestion. A faint ripple where a mouth might form. He leaned closer. His own reflection faintly visible in the monitor glass. And for a fleeting second, the reflection didn't match. He blinked. The reflection blinked a half-beat later. Daniel recoiled in his chair. The footage remained paused. The silhouette still frozen behind Mara. But now, it was no longer looking at her. Its head had turned. Directly toward the camera. Toward him. His throat tightened. You can't unsee a frame, he whispered. He advanced 1 final frame. The glitch tore vertically across the image. For 3 consecutive frames, the silhouette stood alone. Mara gone. The catwalk empty. The entity centered in the frame. As if she had never been there. As if the footage had updated. Daniel's breathing became shallow and uneven. He rewound 5 seconds. Played again. This time, Mara remained visible. The silhouette appeared behind her. Arm extended. But something was different. Her movement stuttered. Like dropped frames. Her body jerked unnaturally forward in half-second increments. As if she were the one being reconstructed. The entity, however, moved smoothly. Daniel felt nausea rise in his throat. He paused on the final recovered frame. The very last image before the tape cut to black. The silhouette stood inches from the lens. Its face filling most of the frame. The void-like impressions where eyes should be. Focused outward. Beyond the camera. Beyond the tape. Beyond the year 1997. Aware. Daniel's reflection hovered faintly over the image. And slowly, without input, the silhouette's head tilted, mirroring his angle exactly. He froze, his own head slightly cocked. The image matched. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead. The basement seemed to hum at a lower frequency. He didn't move. Neither did it. He straightened his posture. The silhouette's head straightened in the paused frame. Impossible. The progress bar remained static, the timestamp unmoving. And yet, the entity responded. Daniel's heart hammered violently in his chest. He whispered hoarsely, "It moves in the gaps." But this time, there were no gaps. The frame was frozen. And still, it watched. His peripheral vision flickered again. A stutter along the shelves behind him. He didn't turn. He was afraid to. Because if the footage could update, so could the room. He forced himself to breathe slowly. To test reality. He blinked deliberately. Closed his eyes. Counted to 3. Opened them. The paused frame remained. The silhouette's face centered. Watching. He leaned closer to the screen, until his breath fogged the glass slightly. And then, for one single perfect frame, the image updated. The silhouette leaned forward, its face filling the entire screen, the hollow eye impressions darkening. And beneath the static, a faint indentation formed. A mouth, curving upward. Daniel jerked back violently. The chair nearly tipped. The screen snapped to black. The VHS player emitted a loud mechanical click. Tape ejected itself abruptly. The plastic cassette slid out halfway and stopped. Silence filled the basement. Thick, suffocating. Daniel stared at the dark monitor, his pulse pounding in his ears. He slowly stood. The room felt subtly wrong. Edges too sharp. Angles slightly misaligned. The shelves at the far end seemed closer. He blinked. They appeared normal again. Sleep deprivation. Paranoia. He turned toward the staircase. The hallway ended abruptly at the cracked door leading upstairs. Beyond it, faint daylight. Normalcy. He took one step forward. The fluorescent lights flickered. For a fraction of a second, the room stuttered, like a dropped frame. And in that half second, he saw it. Not on the screen. Not in reflection. Standing between two shelves. Tall. Elongated. Head aligned. Watching. Then, continuity returned. Empty space. Metal shelving. Boxes. Daniel did not breathe. He whispered, barely audible, "You can't unsee a frame. Because once you've noticed the seams, the world never looks whole again." He looked back at the monitor one last time. The screen remained black, but faintly, in its reflective surface, he saw something standing directly behind him. And this time, it did not flicker. Chapter 10, Tape 18 is recording now. Daniel Reyes was last seen at 3:17 a.m. That detail would matter later. At the time, it felt like just another minute. Another obedient tick of the clock in the archive basement. The fluorescent lights hummed. The air smelled faintly of dust and warm circuitry. Tape 17 lay half ejected from the VHS player, its masking tape label slightly curled at the edge. The monitor was black, reflective, and in that reflection, something stood behind him. He did not turn this time. He had learned something in the past 72 hours. Turning confirmed continuity. Ignoring preserved it. He stared at the black screen, at his own pale reflection, at the elongated distortion rising behind his shoulders. His breathing slowed. Not calm. Resigned. "It moves in the gaps," he whispered. The fluorescent lights flickered. For a fraction of a second, the room stuttered, like a skipped frame. When continuity resumed, the distortion was no longer in the reflection. It stood between the shelves, fully formed, not flickering, not tearing, stable. Daniel's throat tightened. The thing did not rush him. It did not lunge. It simply stood there, head aligned, void-like eyes fixed forward, waiting. The basement clock ticked. 3:17 a.m. Daniel felt something shift, not in the room, in perception. A subtle thinning, like the seam between seconds had stretched too far. He took one slow step backward. The floor beneath his shoes felt slightly delayed in contact. The world lagged. The shelves to his left shimmered faintly. The entity took one smooth step forward. Not segmented. Not stuttering. Smooth. Daniel understood then. It no longer needed the gaps. It had learned to persist. He reached blindly for the VHS player. For tape 17. Because this had started with a recording. Maybe it could end with one. He shoved the tape back into the player. The machine accepted it instantly. The monitor flickered to life without him pressing play. Static filled the screen. Then, the catwalk. But Myra was gone. The plant was empty. The camera panned slowly down the metal walkway. As if searching. As if hunting. Daniel's reflection hovered faintly in the screen. And behind his reflection, the entity did not appear. He glanced toward the shelves. The space between them was empty again. No distortion. No silhouette. Minor relief flooded him. The tape was playing. The horror contained. On the screen, the camera reached the end of the catwalk. And slowly turned, not toward where Mara had stood, toward the lens itself. The image glitched. And for a single frame, the archive basement appeared. From the impossible elevated angle. Daniel seated at the desk, facing forward, watching. He froze. The timestamp embedded in the corner read 03/17/22. The camera zoomed in slowly on Daniel's recorded face. On the screen, not moving, not blinking, a layer of Daniel observing Daniel. The footage stuttered. The silhouette stepped into frame behind the recorded version of him. Head aligned. Void eyes forward. Daniel's real heart hammered violently. He turned to look behind him. Nothing. He looked back at the screen. The silhouette leaned down toward the recorded Daniel's ear. The audio hissed. Layered whispers filling the basement speakers. Not just his name now. A phrase. Repeated. If it's not logged. The recording glitched violently. The image tore horizontally. The plant and the basement merged again. Metal beams overlapping shelves. Concrete walls cutting through rusted catwalk railings. Daniel felt the floor beneath him waver, as if reality were buffering. He stumbled backward. The clock ticked again. 3:17. The second hand jerked, then froze. The monitor went black. Total silence. No hum. No static. Just absence. Daniel stood alone in the basement, breathing hard. The fluorescent lights steadied. The shelves stood unmoving. The VHS player sat quiet. He waited. 10 seconds. 20. Nothing happened. The seam felt sealed again. Minor relief returned. Shaky. Fragile. He laughed softly. A dry, broken sound. Sleep deprivation, he muttered. He looked at the clock again. 3:18 a.m. Time had resumed. He stepped toward the staircase. The hallway ended abruptly at the cracked door. Beyond it, silence. No light from upstairs. No faint office sounds. He reached for the door handle. And the world stuttered. One frame. Darkness. Next frame. The basement empty. Next frame. Metal shelves. Next frame. Nothing. Then, continuity returned. But Daniel Reyes was no longer there. At 8:42 a.m., an officer descended the basement stairs to retrieve archived files. He found the evidence room empty. Chair slightly angled away from the desk. VHS player powered on. Monitor dark. No sign of Daniel. Security footage from the hallway camera showed him entering the basement at 9:14 p.m. the night before. No footage showed him leaving. The hallway camera glitched at exactly 3:17 a.m. 3 frames missing. Just static. Internal investigation followed. Nothing conclusive. The archive system was reviewed. Audit logs checked. And that was when someone noticed it. A new media entry. Case 97208. Media inventory updated. 03:17 a.m. Tape 18. No clerk ID attached. No manual input recorded. Just an automated entry. Tape 18. The physical cassette was found in the evidence drawer. Fresh masking tape across its spine. Handwritten in black marker. 18. No one admitted writing it. No one remembered logging it. If it's not logged, it's not real, one officer joked nervously. But this one was logged, which meant it was real. Detective Arthur Harlow returned to the basement himself, hands trembling slightly as he inserted tape 18 into the player. The screen flickered to life. Static. Then, the archive basement. Elevated angle. Daniel seated at the desk, watching tape 17. The timestamp read 03:17:00. The footage played silently at first. Daniel leaned forward, paused the video, zoomed in. The silhouette appeared behind him in a single frame. Then 2. Then 3. Harlow's breath caught. The recording continued. Daniel stood abruptly, turned toward the shelves. The frame stuttered. For a split second, the silhouette stood between the shelves. Stable, fully formed. Daniel stepped backward, reached for the VHS player. The tape glitched violently. The plan and basement overlapped. The image tore. And then, the silhouette stepped forward. Into Daniel. The frame froze. Harlow's heart pounded in his ears. He advanced one frame forward. The chair was empty. Daniel gone. The silhouette now stood alone in the center of the room, facing the camera. The next frame. The silhouette leaned closer to the lens, void eyes filling the screen. The final frame. Black. Silence. The tape ejected itself. Harlow did not move for a long time. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. He whispered, voice barely audible. We buried it because it didn't obey physics. But physics had never been the problem. Observation was. He turned toward the monitor one last time. The screen was black, reflective, and for just a heartbeat, he thought he saw something behind his own reflection. Not moving, not flickering, stable, watching. The clock ticked. Clean, precise. Another second stitched together. Another seam. And somewhere, between one frame and the next, tape 18 was still recording. Because if it's not logged, it's not real. Until it is.
Closing chapter.
They tried to bury it because it didn't fit into paperwork, because it didn't obey time codes, because it existed between seconds where nothing is supposed to live. But the truth about tape 17 isn't that it was corrupted. It's that it was evolving. Every replay fed it. Every freeze frame gave it form. And every person who watched it became part of the footage. Some horrors don't chase you down hallways. They wait in compression artifacts, in static. In the space between frames, your brain stitches together to make sense of motion. So the next time your screen glitches, the next time a video stutters for just a fraction of a second, don't ignore it. Ask yourself, what moved in the gap? And if you're brave enough, rewind.